This podcast deals with themes, languages, and situations that may not be suitable for young audiences. If you're under the age of 18, parental guidance isn't going to help you here. Welcome to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. I'm Drew.
And I'm Jobim.
This week, we are unknotting the mystique and tying up the loose ends about Shibari, the Japanese art of rope bondage. This is part one of Not That Innocent, a study on Shibari, where we'll talk a little bit about the history of this erotic art, get to know a few fine folks who likey the ropey, and some common misconceptions surrounding this art. Some trigger warnings. Well, obviously, we're going to talk about kink, violence, sex, maybe a little masturbation, maybe a little self-harm. So, let's be careful here.
If you're listening live and like what you hear, you can join the discussion by leaving a comment below. And if we have time, we'll get to them as the show goes on. Now, on to the discussion.
All right. I'm super excited to introduce our special guests for this week. We have Shibari educator and performer Winter Nawa. There we go. Hey. Oh.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks so much for being here. Even though it's super early where you are today.
I think it is now 4 a.m. So.
Well, thanks for waking up super early to join us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm so happy to speak about rope in the Philippines again.
Yeah.
Awesome.
We also have sadomasochist and rope switch, Rai.
Hey.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today, Rai and Winter. So we'll get to ask you some questions later about your own personal practice. But before we get into that, I think we need to give a little context to our listeners who are brand new to this whole concept. So could you explain a little bit what Shibari or what rope bondage is?
So Shibari is a Japanese art form that involves painting the human form using ropes. Rope bondage uses rope. It doesn't have a specific, like when you say rope bondage, it doesn't have a specific cultural connotation because there's different styles. There's Western style and Japanese style. It's the biggest difference, but then there's also French macrame, but I've seen more French artists use it. And it's just restricting people for bondage. It could be an art, could be not an art. And a lot of the time, the thing with kink labels and kink definitions is these terms are very subjective to the person's experience. So the second you give a definition, there's going to be someone that says, but for me, that's not how it is. So I
just
have some background in philosophy, and I'm just like, you're always trying to find the ultimate end or the definition or what makes a thing the thing. And it drove me nuts when I was new to the scene because everything's and everyone is different.
Yeah. Just like what she said, it's like it's different for everyone. It's like you can use bondage for like you can give pain to the person that you're tying. It could be sexual, it could be non-sexual, it could be just an art form like painting or something like that. And yeah, it really depends on the person, but technically it's just ropes tying people and having fun with it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding of the history of like rope bondage, especially in Japan, it was developed as a way to restrain prisoners,
Yes.
or right? It was developed as a way to restrain prisoners in a way that was still humane,
Oh
I
yes,
guess.
the famous kinky prisons of the Tokugawa shogunate. They were always tying people up and giving them
So
pleasure.
it's interesting how that evolved into what it is today, where yeah, it doesn't always involve sex, but I don't think we're tying people up in prisons anymore. It's mainly for usually sexual purposes or just people who are interested in kink. So like in all that time, a lot of styles have developed, and you mentioned earlier quite a few. You mentioned Japanese, Western style bondage. What are the differences between these styles?
If we could go back to, do you want to talk about styles first or the history first?
Oh, well, we can do
Oh sure,
history
yeah.
first.
We have more about
Okay.
history. Go ahead.
Um,
Yeah.
so for the history, a lot of people do cite Hojujutsu, which is the takedown and capture rope. They tended to do this because they would use rope because metal was reserved for swords. So they didn't have handcuffs like the West did. So for them, as they do, it developed into a very, very rich cultural context because they also have rope tying as a Shinto practice, I think. I can't talk too much about it because I don't know that much about the religious aspects of rope in Japanese culture. But there's that. They also used rope in the No drama. There were some, I think, no, not No drama, but there was some dramas. They had a Japanese version of like the Three Stooges, but there was just two, and they were drunk guys, and they were always getting into trouble. But somehow they would always end up tied up on stage. Now, the shibari, as we know it, as it's done, is actually a little bit closer to that than it is to Hojojutsu, because Hojojutsu, they the ties are they're not very kind. Because they're meant to like dislocate joints if you try to run away. Like
Ooh.
you'll dislocate your shoulder, or
It's really meant
they'll
for
put you.
prisoners.
Yes, they'll put you in certain positions for interrogation, and yeah, they don't mind if your body's intact because at the end of it, they're gonna.
Right. So the
Oh,
safety is not a priority in the
No,
other style. Yeah. Okay.
no, no. But it is very pretty. It's very streamlined. At one point, I was trying to study it because it's been cited as the progenitor of rope and shibari.
I mean, as dangerous as it is there a safe way to practice it?
Ah, maybe study martial arts. Go into go because at the higher levels of, I don't remember which martial art it is. If it's like aikido or judo, there's very high levels of
So
martial arts where they do take down and capture that involves rope.
it's
That would
really
be the
aggressive.
Oh.
closest. Yes.
Okay.
ooh,
I
we have a question here from one of our customers. Alice asks, I've heard people interchange this word with kinbaku. So what's the
Mm,
difference between them?
that's a good question. Very good question. I like that question. So kinbaku means to tie tightly,
Yes.
and shibari just means to tie. So if you're gonna tie flowers, like you're wrapping up flowers to give to someone as a gift, or you're buying flowers from a store, you can shibari flowers. But
It's
you kinbaku is more to a person because you're also
Oh.
tying with your heart. So
What?
that's where the inside is more because there's the connotation of, if you're very familiar with someone, you know their body well enough, you may end up tying tighter because you know where you can do that, you understand their body better.
it's
Mm.
more. Would you say that it's like a more emotional practice than just shibari? Because I feel like kinbaku is like you said, it's you know the person well enough to know which parts to tie tightly. So I think it's also a more emotional practice than just tying it as an art because you're tying a person.
It can be, definitely. And there's
Mm.
some people who will say they do kinbaku as they will introduce themselves as I do kinbaku. There's some people that will say I do shibari. I'm not
Mm.
sure if they go into the nuances of this word because I'm not a native Japanese speaker, and but some people might be, or some people actually, yeah, I think some of them say shibari, some of them say kinbaku. So but the main difference that people have made is one is you're tying with your heart, and the other is you're just tying. But both still have aspects of connection. Like if you see someone tying
Mm.
and it doesn't look Japanese, but their heart's in it, and a Japanese person sees it, they can be like, "Oh yeah, that's shibari," you know, or it can be you can be doing the forms, but your heart's not in it, and it's like that's not
Mm.
they don't feel anything. What are you doing?
Yeah.
One way that one of my friends explained it, they're also not a native Japanese speaker, so a little bit of an asterisk there, although they do know the language. The way that they explained it to me is that for them, kinbaku is like, I guess, more sexual, but I guess what he meant was more intimate.
Mm.
Like
Yeah, yeah.
shibari, you could do that, I guess, for performances or as a demonstration, but like kinbaku has that vulnerability, sometimes a sexual component, but there's just like a closeness between you
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
person.
And I think most most Japanese tying would be called shibari, and then like a subsection of that would be kinbaku. So kinbaku can be called shibari, but not all shibari is kinbaku. And that's where it's like there's people online that fight about this, so it's a hot topic, but it's a very good question.
So what are some of these different styles you mentioned earlier about you had like macrame? I've actually never even heard of like French macrame style.
Hmm.
I know macrame as like a craft, like an arts and crafts type of thing, but not as a rope
So
bondage type of thing.
yeah, so it's kind of like that, but on the human body. And it's super pretty. I haven't seen suspensions done in macrame, but I've seen a lot of weaving patterns. Um if I'm able to, I can share like the profile of someone that does this work as a really good example of it.
Oh, I'd love to see that. I haven't actually heard like macrame on the human body.
So, well, how about the difference between Western style bondage and Japanese style bondage?
Haha, that is also a very hot topic. um
Are there camps? Are they rival camps? Is there a warring
um,
ideology between Western and
Is it
Eastern
like
rope
Apple
bondage?
versus PC,
Yeah,
Android
Mhm.
versus
there used to
iOS?
be,
there
yes.
used to be.
Well, I say used to because I don't participate in that
Uh,
anymore, like in that thought process. So I don't know if
mhm,
it's still going on. It probably still is for a lot of people. The way I reconciled it for myself is they're two different styles that occurred in different cultural contexts.
mhm,
So they have different reasons for doing the things they do.
Mm.
Usually when you look at something you can tell whether it's Japanese or Western because the techniques applied are different. So Japanese style will always start at the bite. Give me a second. I will just grab a random piece of rope. So
nice.
Just
um,
casually lying around.
no, like I set up in my rope space, so I'm like actually under my rig right now
Nice.
because this is where the backdrop and the lighting are good. So like I start at the ends and I find the center, and this is my bite. Japanese style will usually start from the bite. Sometimes Western rope won't, like they'll start with it split, or they'll start with one end, which I'm not sure why someone would do that. You want it to be flat, cover more surface area, distribute weight better. So yeah, that's
So
one of
that's the
the
main
main
difference.
differences. Yes,
The
Okay.
because if
techniques
you apply
applied.
the rope differently, it's going to look very different. And there's also some classical, very classical Japanese patterns that you will see in different variations. That like, oh yeah, that's a gote, that's a TK, that's a
Yes,
tsutomo,
yes.
So,
that's
Rye, Winter, have you guys gotten into all these different kinds, and do you have any preference for either one?
For me, because I'm more experienced as a rope bunny, but I recently started tying as a rigger only this year.
Hmm.
But one thing that my master always tells me is that to go back to the basics. So one thing that I always practice when tying a bunny is the TK, the takate gote. So I think I would say it's not really my favorite, but it's one of the things that I prioritize in practicing now because a lot of ties or a lot of the sessions practices always start at the TK. Not always, but most of the time it starts with the TK. So it's one of the things that I prioritize in practicing.
We have a
I would
question from. Oh yeah, there you go. Sorry,
oh,
Winter. Yeah, go ahead.
I would agree. I also really have a strong preference for the TK because it's the classical Japanese tie,
Yes.
that style tie.
Hmm.
And
All
it's
right.
how you graduate into more advanced rope is you
Yes.
have to have a good TK, then you can go into the more suspensiony stuff.
Yes.
Floor work's
It seems
underrated.
there is a
Like floor work's
theme
great.
of like perfecting the basics so that you can
Yes,
really
you
feel
always
comfortable
have.
branching out. No.
Yes,
Yes, you
you
need
really have
to
to
have a
master the basics.
We
technically
have a
sound TK.
we have
We have a really
another
interesting.
question here from one
Yeah.
of our customers from Marielle. Would also like to ask about Semenawa. I might have butchered
Oh,
that.
yes.
Is it
Oh.
any different or are they incorporated?
I think Rye might enjoy this proclivity.
Well, because I'm a sadomasochist, so Semenawa is basically just like in Baku, you're tying tightly, but also incorporating painful aspects to it. Like you're tying someone, and the purpose is to make them suffer somehow. Like suffer can be different. Could mean differently for you. Like you can make someone emotionally suffer from it or physically suffer from it. But basically, Semenawa is kind of like a sub branch also of Shibari. It's like tying tightly but with pain. And that's what I like.
Mm. Is a prerequisite. The pain is necessary for Semenawa.
Kind of.
Okay.
Yes.
Semenawa is actually the word made it back to Japan. So nawa means rope. Seme is the way they say SM. So they're saying it's SM rope. It's Saturn SM.
Mm.
Oh, so it's a
So
fairly new term. Is this a
uh
fairly modern term?
most rope is fairly modern. Most rope, as we know it, Shibari, came out after World War II
Oh
when
wow,
Mhm. So
that recent.
it has throwbacks, let's say.
Hmm.
So there is Hojujutsu, there is the drama, there is the religious practices, there is like the when you're transporting a prisoner, they're tied a certain way so that the way the tie looks, people know what they did, and then they're being publicly humiliated and shamed, which is
Oh,
why it had some of
there
that
was a
shame
way to
aspect too.
Oh,
there
Yes,
was a way to
wow.
symbolize it with the rope, with the kind of
yes,
knots.
Kind of
yes,
like
Wow,
a
that's so.
scarlet letter, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But with
And
rope.
we have
also
another.
some
Yes.
knots, they're like how intricate the tie is, would also indicate the stature of the person being tied. So like there's a different tie for this person is really rich and they did this, or this person
Mm.
is high up, this person is a noble of some sort
Mm.
and they did this, or this person is a poor guy that stole bread
I
and
would imagine that's even more embarrassing. Like they
Yeah.
came up with a brand specifically for your social class. We also have a pretty good question from Matt who asks, where can we get rope? Will any rope do, or are there specialty ropes for these arts? Which I think is a pretty decent question.
that is a good question.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, this is where some of the style comes in too. So as
Oh,
Ryan and I
style.
seem to be more akin to the Japanese side of rope, we
Mhm.
are
Yes.
going to prefer natural fiber rope. This is jute.
Jute rope.
Rye probably enjoys coconut. You like coconut?
I've never seen
Yes.
coconut rope.
Coconut rope is
Yes.
very rough.
Rougher.
The texture is abrasive.
Oh.
So if someone
Oh.
likes pricklier sensations or pain play involved, there might be rope. There might be coconut rope.
Mm-hmm.
There's also synthetic ropes. Do I have one handy? Here's a plush rope.
I like how you're just like grabbing rope here,
Yeah.
grabbing rope there.
I mean, it's messy, but I can show you. Like, I have like my rope rack and my stuffies.
Wow,
And
welcome to Rope Warehouse.
Wow.
boxes
Oh
right
wow.
there.
I
So
like
we're
that.
like, oh, and that's my rig.
Nice.
We're like at my little.
Bunny says Rise ropes gave me a neat burn.
Ah,
Ooh.
I
yes.
also did very much enjoy the rope burn from after the days after that
Yeah.
Rai tied me. That was very
I'm
enjoyable.
honored that you guys like my tying.
Okay, so Matt has a great question about the pros and cons of each rope. We'll get into that. But before that, usually we do a newsstand, but I guess we'll still do a newsstand, but it's news about Now Open. So sad to say that this is going to be our last live show.
Mhm.
This doesn't mean we will be gone. It just means that we won't be streaming live on Facebook anymore, but you can still catch us on Spotify. We will still be producing episodes, and we will still be hopping on Facebook so that we can talk to y'all.
Yes.
It
Nice.
just won't be the actual show anymore. So you listen to the
You'll
show on
still be able to
Spotify.
find. Yep. You'll still be able to
Yeah.
find the podcast wherever you normally listen to podcasts that aren't live. So we're not going anywhere. We're just not doing the live show anymore. We're still here.
Yeah. And
How
we'll
about YouTube? Yes, I think we're. Will we have?
well, I guess
but
that'll be
if
technically be dead.
if
'Cause
we
we're
do
not
upload
doing the live
anything
show.
on YouTube, it would be audio files. You know what I mean?
So basically
yeah.
Spotify.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this will be our last live show, but we'll still try and find ways to hang out with y'all. Maybe we'll do a Twitter Spaces. Maybe we can do like a little get together and we can talk about the episode and like any questions you have. But that being said, please buy our merch.
Yeah, we have
That was
merch.
a great segue. That was like a hard left.
Buy
into
their
merch.
merch.
Buy our
Oh yeah,
merch.
by the way, we have merch.
So we've been talking about merch for months. Like we announced the merch during our first anniversary in August. It is now November, but it is better late than never. So we actually have our merch store is now live. I'm going to add the link in the comments. You can also find it in the episode description. So you can actually go there right now and order merch. What do we got? We got a t-shirt designed by National Book Award winner Rob Cham. He also designed recently a Pale Pilsen can.
Yes.
So you can get a Rob Cham shirt. And you can also
while you're
get some
drinking your pale
stickers.
pilsen, be like, same guy. To be the coolest guy at the
I
party.
am actually wearing the Now Open shirt right now. I am wearing it right now. This is the front. It says Now Open. And oh god, do I have to how do I do this? How do I
Arch your back, Trisha.
Okay, let's try this. Okay.
There we go. Yep. We totally
can
saw
do
it.
it.
That's the shot.
Oh, that's
Yes.
so cute.
Yes.
That is what the
That's so
shirt looks like
cute.
in real life. So you can't see me, but I'm currently wearing a 2XL. It's actually pretty huge, y'all.
And
So
if you normally listen to our show, you might find your face on the back of that shirt. Who knows? Who knows? Is your face there? You'll have to
Ooh.
buy the merch to see.
yeah, try to spot all of us. Even Presh is there, but Presh is a little disguised.
Yeah.
So we got a shirt, which we're selling for $650, and we also have a bunch of stickers that you can buy.
Stickers.
These were designed in collaboration with Multo. So this is specifically for Kai. Scheduling is sexy. That one was designed specifically
That's
for
the
Kai.
best.
There's
That is
also
the
a
best.
glass dildo and these two sexy people having sex. So
Wow.
got a bunch of merch. Please check out our merch store and help support this podcast. All right, that's it. That's our newsstand.
And that's the newsstand sitting down. Back to the discussion.
Mhm.
Okay, so earlier we talked about the history of shibari and rope bondage, and a little bit about the different styles. We'll get to your question, Matt, about the pros and cons of different rope, but I want to ask Winter and Rye, like, what about you? Like, what are your styles? How did you start out and figure out what kind of styles you were into?
Yeah, how'd you even get into shibari?
As for me, I started 2019. So I wasn't thinking of doing the tying. I was just interested in getting tied and getting tortured consensually.
It does look like
But
fun.
yeah, but when I started tying, I since I'm just kind of new, I'm more on relying on what my master teaches me and just kind of like exploring from there. So I don't really have a specific style yet, but I definitely want some mine to be emotional. I want mine to be connective, and I want mine to also somehow give pain to the subject, but kind of like in a sexy way.
In a pleasurable way. Yeah.
Yes.
How about you, Winter?
Um, so I started because I had a partner that wanted to learn,
Mm.
and so I was trying to find a way for us to learn more. It was in the Philippines, and at this time, the scene wasn't that big yet there compared to today in the Philippines. And there were no resources. There was one person that seemed to know how to tie, and they were running a munch. And I went there, and I think, I'm not sure if I even met them there, but they might have been there like later on. Um, and I was told by other people that they didn't really teach. And there was someone that was from another scene that was like, "Oh, I teach other things," and they seemed to know what they were talking about, and they wanted to start an educational community. So back then, this was when the Philippines only had one munch, and it was more of a meet and greet. And then a friend of mine wanted to start. Someone who became my friend wanted to start an educational group, and since I had joined the scene to learn, because I'm like, well, I want to know more about how people do this in real life and not just fantasy and books, like
Mm.
how is this applied? So we did that. And somehow by happenstance, we were connected. That group was connected with someone in Hong Kong who is actually, they were staying in Hong Kong for a while. But they have ties to Japan. Their name is Nuit de Tokyo. I've asked him in the past if I could refer to him because I had an informal mentorship with him for a few years where I would try to learn something and I would try to see him once a year, but it's harder now because I'm further away. Uh, and it so happens that just by stroke of luck, apparently he was a very big name and I didn't even know it. Um, he's the third deshi of Yukimura Haruki, who he's passed away now, but he was one of the top five grandmasters of rope in Japan. And his style, Yukimura Ryu, is the style that's most specifically about connection. Is when you get deep into the philosophy of it, it's not even about the rope. There are no specific Yukimura. I mean, there's a way that he does the TK, there's a way that he does certain ties, but the essential part of it is the connection. So I started off on the deep end and I had no idea, but I loved it and I still do. So there.
So, how is this like connective style of rope different? What makes it, how is it more like emotional? What kind of like moves or philosophies do you have?
Hmm. For me, I think you feel it.
Yeah,
And for
I do.
me, it's like, it's a little bit. abstract to just say connect. What is this connection? Connection, you know? For me, it's simply like you care about the person. You care about what they're getting out of the experience. You care about their safety and where their headspace is at. And just through the empathy and the moment, kind of everything else melts away. And it's just
Yes.
you and the person, and you're in this little bubble, and it doesn't matter what like your shitty coworker said or did, or it doesn't matter what troubles you have at home. In that moment, you are just in that moment.
Yes. I definitely relate as someone like I have a the master dude like my master. So I get into subspace and he knows me enough that when he ties like it should just be the right kind of pain. It just has to be the right kind of tight. And everything just like when you're in the moment, everything's just gone. You're in subspace and you're just like I think that's where the connection goes. It's like when the person just knows how to touch you, how to communicate with you. Yeah.
How long
Let's
have
talk
you
a
been
little bit.
flying together?
Oh, sorry.
About almost 3 years now.
So that's one thing I also wanted to emphasize and endorse is when you have a regular rope partner, you start to build a vocabulary of experiences with them. And you start to
Yes.
know if I do this, then that happens. Or if I do this, they feel that way. They like this a lot. They really don't
Yeah.
like that. So I'll save that for like never. Or I'll save that for like when I want to be a dick. So that's a thing. Then there's also the opposite of that where um, switching can be a good idea because you learn as both top and bottom. And
Yes.
also, there's the idea of if you're tying with multiple people, you learn how to tie different body types and for different situations and different limitations and how to adapt to different things. And for the bottom side, you learn how to communicate with different people because otherwise, you kind of insularly only develop for tying with each other
Mm.
rather than tying as a whole, where it's like, because you have to communicate in rope. And
Yes,
ultimately,
yes.
in a way, for me, like when I'm in that space, for me, rope is a form of communication because of that vocabulary of experience. So instead of using words, I'm using actions or situations
Mm.
or placements of rope or sensations to convey what I want to express or what I want the person to experience.
Yes.
So I want to understand. I'm all full disclosure. I'm also a rope enthusiast. But for people who've never been tied up, it might sound a little intimidating, scary, counterintuitive. You know, like why would you want to give up literally control of your entire body and put yourself at the mercy of someone else, or why would you want to be tied in a constrictive way, especially because with something like Semenawa where there's pain involved. So what are your reasons for getting into it? Or why do you like it?
I have a general response to that. So oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone that makes you feel love in your brain. And when you are hugged, or if you eat chocolate, you get this feeling. And when there are ropes tight around you, it feels like a hug everywhere. And if you're intimidated, you don't have to be suspended. You don't have to go up. Actually, that's like you work up to that. You can start on the floor. Like I said, floor work is overrated. You can do a lot more on the floor because there's a lot less to worry about there. Once you go up, like that's when you need to worry about the nerves and the circulation. And I mean, you think about it anyways on the floor, but it's times 100 when you go up.
Mm. Yes, yes.
And then there's adrenaline. If you're an adrenaline junkie, you're gonna love being suspended, or you're gonna love being like, what can I do next? I did this badass thing. What can I do next? Like, how do
Yeah.
you top your own self? Like, I mean, not top as in top and bottom, but top as in like, do better than. How do I continue to grow? I had my primary bunny, Sakura. She was always looking for how she can do the next thing, and because of that, I grew so much because she was like, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. So I was like, okay, let me see, how do we do this? Wait, okay, let's go back. How do we do this? Okay, I think we can do it this way, but not that way, and try to figure out how to do it. And we do that, and yeah, I grew so much because of her. I would not be the rigger I am if it wasn't for her goading me and being like, because she's a bit of an edge player too. So she was a pro dom. So in her own, her risk appetite was higher than typical.
Hmm. Yeah.
How about
I
you, Rai?
Well, I like ropes because, well, aside from the fact that obviously I'm a sadomasochist, so I'm in here for the pain, but also because being tied, like Winter said, feels like a big hug. There's also this, uh, when you're tied and you're at the mercy of someone, especially someone that you trust, it just feels like you're letting go of everything that bothers you, everything that burdens you. And in that moment, you're just vulnerable and you're at peace. And I like that the most because winter.
So
I like that
sweet.
the most because it's like at that moment, you're just you. You don't have to pretend. There's nothing except you and that partner and this experiences, this moment right now.
That's so beautiful. All right. I think that's a
Great
really
answers
good,
across the board.
right? I think that's a really good note to end on for part one of Not That Innocent, a study on Shibari. Make sure to stay tuned for part two, which is coming right up, where we'll talk about the experiences we have uh, when we are being tied or tying someone else, a few lessons we've learned from rope bondage, and a few tips on how to get started on your own. So stay around for that. Producer, take us away to your opening
Built in
song.
desire, sparks turn fire. Heart on a wire, chase the smell of smoke and liquor. Don't drink a buster, soon this will be over. But while we ain't sober, baby, you can't lose me. I'm begging to be haunted. Take my hand and take the big shit. I see you moving towards me, so come finish what you started. Tonight won't last, no questions asked.
And that was Haunted by Rosa and Solana. You can stream their music now on Spotify. And please, if you want to be featured on the show, we'd be honored. Please send us your clips uh, to nowopenph@gmail.com. Send us your clips and a short description, and we'll play your song on the show.
That's right. We have a huge audience. You send your song over to our show, and all of a sudden, 12 people know it.
Exactly. That's 12 more than it used to.
Yeah, that's a lot actually.
Well,
So,
it's a
welcome back.
podcast, so it also trickles over time.
Exactly. There's infinite replayability there. So, welcome
Yes.
back to Now Open the Podcast, the sex education podcast that's more sex than education. I'm Drew.
I'm Jobim.
And we, of course, are joined by Rai and Winter.
This
So,
week we're
this
learning some.
week, you want to do it?
This week we're learning some lessons and insights from the fine art of Shibari and how you can start practicing as well. In part one, we discussed the people behind the rope and some common misconceptions. This is part two of Not That Innocent, although Matt says that an alternative title for this should have been Naughty and Nice.
Ooh.
That's witty.
This is part two
That's
of Not That
great.
Innocent study on Shibari. We'll talk about the experiences, the positive, the negative, and how you can experience them for yourself. The positive ones we mean. Trigger warnings, as in the first part: kink, violence, sex, masturbation, and possibly some self-harm.
All right. So, we're once again joined by Rai and Winter, two of our favorite Shibari experts for this week. So in part one, we talked about the history. We talked a little bit about Winter and Rai themselves. Now let's get a little deeper. So, what do you think is one thing, like if you had to choose one thing that everybody should absolutely know about Shibari?
Hmm.
If it has to be like the one only thing they know about it, what should it be?
Uh, One
Rope
thing,
does
two
not
things
equal
came to
sex.
me. Yes, yes.
People always
Oh,
assume it means sex, or that if people are tying, that they're sleeping with each other. No, you can have
that is.
intimacy without sex. What's sex,
Yes.
anyways? These are all sorts of questions, right? This gets sticky. This is a can of worms.
We're gonna be here for the next 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, 3 days.
I think for me, it's like rope is definitely fun, but it can be dangerous. Like, there's definitely risks to it. There's definitely dangers to
Mm.
it. So if you're gonna get involved with ropes, even if it's just basic ties, you have to know how to prevent accidents. You have to know the body placements, everything, the basics, back to the basics, because it can be dangerous.
I'm curious, what are some of the hazards or common accidents that happen when rope tying? What are some of the things that are the mistakes that commonly occur?
Nerve damages. I think that's some of the most common accidents that happens. Like when you tie in a certain placement too tight or the wrong placement in general, you can damage your nerves and you can lose sensation to the hands, to the feet,
Forever?
and
In
I
some
wouldn't say
cases.
forever, but some cases, yes,
Oh,
yes.
damn.
So
Mm.
I
actually, it's not super widespread knowledge, but if someone's a professional rope model, after about 3 years, they probably already have some cumulative nerve damage.
Yeah.
Really?
However, nerve damage is, I would say, it's not necessarily the most common. Sorry, Ray.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm learning also.
It's the most serious. There has been like one instance of people dying from shibari, but it's very specific. Like
Okay.
I think this was it happened in Italy
Oh wow.
where they didn't have the rope, they didn't have the scissors, they didn't have their cutting tool
Oh no.
when they were playing. Um, they were all high and drunk.
Oh.
Ooh.
And it was three people, so it was a rigger and their partner and someone that was joining them, and they were in a breath predicament.
Ah, yeah,
So the
yeah.
two were like, if one was comfortable, the other one was suffocating, and
Mm.
the cutting tool was in the trunk of the car.
No.
Oh.
And somebody suffocated.
And somebody suffocated, and it was the person's partner. Unfortunately, it was a horrible,
No.
really bad
Oh.
story. I It was news maybe 7 years ago or 8 years
Mhm.
ago. I think the rigger still ties. Like a few years later, I'm like, I have no idea. Like, it's a horrible situation to be in, no matter
Mhm.
which. So, like, always have your cutting tool.
Right. Especially if
Yes.
that's your partner, you know. I mean, speaking of partners, I mean, I'm sure that you guys have developed relationships through this practice, through the community. Rai, you've mentioned your master several times.
Mm.
Uh, what has Shibari taught you about relationships and how you are in relationships?
Um, I've definitely learned a lot. I definitely learned that I suck at communicating. At least in the beginning, I was not vocal with my emotions. I was not vocal like with what I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do. But I've definitely improved so much with that because my master is the kind of person who encourages you to speak up and encourages you like if this is what you want, you have to tell me. If this is what you don't want, you have to tell me. And I've definitely realized that with shibari, especially because it involves literal tying and you involve danger into the mix of the relationship, you kind of have to really trust the person, you know. There's trust to it, so communication and comprehension plays a big part in the relationship. and understanding, a lot of understanding.
So let's talk about some of the experiences that you've had as people in the scene and as people as riggers and riggy. Uh,
Riggy.
I actually do have a question because somebody did ask me this a couple of weeks ago. Why is it called rope bunny?
Yeah.
Does anybody
I
know?
don't know of any activity that involves the frequent tying up of rabbits. I don't know what that.
Right? It can't be a turn of phrase. Like,
Well, there's
what is
also the
that?
term snow bunny, which refers to another kind of person.
Fair
I
I
enough.
think
am
bunny is
not
just
sure why. Actually, it was just when I went to dojo in Australia, they just called people riggers and bunnies. And when I went back to the Philippines and started teaching, that's the phrasing I used. But it's used in other places too. It's used in the West. Um, I'm not sure where it comes from. Some people are like, is it because they wiggle when they're tied up and they jump around? I'm like, I don't know, maybe. If someone knows, please let me please tell me.
I'm interested also.
This is a frequently asked question.
I think my favorite headcanon or my favorite theory is that you know the little bunny nose wiggle?
Oh
Like
yeah.
Yeah.
that's the wiggle that you do when you're tied up and you can't itch your nose. That's my favorite headcanon about it. But I'm not that doesn't sound like it's right.
So I'm a sadomasochist too, but I'm selective about when I express my sadism because, like, for me, it's for the longest time I was in denial about it. So for me, it's hard. Like, I have to feel really comfortable and really close to someone. But sometimes when I'm being a dick, someone's like, my nose is itchy. I'm like, okay, I'll scratch it, but then I'll pull my finger back. And they're
Oh,
tied up and they're like,
that's so
damn it,
evil of
Winter.
you. That's so
evil.
evil.
It's very
Hard limit.
small.
Hard
Very
limit.
small thing, and it's harmless. But if you experience it, it's irritating as fuck.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting because like a lot of people think that when we talk about bondage and I guess BDSM on a larger scale, it's a lot about pain. It's a lot about leather, whips,
Yeah.
chains, degrading people. But even something as small as
Dominatrixes
like
and all that. Yeah.
fishnets and
Yeah.
whatever. But like even as something as simple as like I'm not gonna scratch your nose.
Yeah. Tickling, you know, even
Right, right.
It's
even
like, you're tied
tickling.
up. You can't.
You
All the
want me to
time,
scratch your
yeah.
nose? Too bad.
And the
Yeah.
You've
more I
been
don't,
dominated.
the more it's like the most dominant thing you think about, and the
Yeah.
right, and then it's like you can have it. You can have it. So it's a bit of a mind fuck.
Yeah. Even
I
tickling can
know.
be a form of torture. Like
Oh yeah.
Right.
you're all tied up and like you're
All
gonna
tickling
tickle
is a
the
form of
person. Oh,
torture.
it's horrible. It's
Oh, that's
horrible.
hard. Hard.
Tickling is also
No.
a hard limit of mine.
Do you
I'm
guys
okay
do
with
No.
so
anything?
many things.
Do you guys do anything to get into the headspace when you're about to tie somebody up, or if you're about to be tied up? Is there? I can imagine that being tied up, you'd have to be in the right headspace. Otherwise,
Yes.
it might turn into a pretty bad experience pretty fast. So, what do you
Mm-mm.
guys do?
For me, when I get tied, well, I haven't really been tied with a lot of people. Like it's mostly with just my master and a few friends. But when I get tied, I like to be like there's communication beforehand. Like we're gonna like you don't have to tell me all the things that you're gonna do to me, but there's you're gonna tell me that oh you're gonna suffer. Okay, okay, I'm ready for it. But when I'm tying, I usually ask the bunny if like is there some kind of music that you prefer to listen to? Is there like what's your yes, no's, what's your maybes that we can discuss? And
Mm.
yeah, but mostly it's just like I try to make them as especially if I'm meeting them for the first time. I try to make them as comfortable as possible before tying, and then I can be not nice to you.
Okay, I like that. There are levels to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
For me, it depends. Um, cause going back again to the types of rope, uh, bedroom rope, performance rope, photography rope are all different.
Yeah.
So depending on what you're doing, you might use different rope, you might use different techniques, you might use different ties. Um, so if it's more of an intimate setting where my goal is really to connect, like I don't want it to be too bright. I want there to be enough light, but like sometimes fluorescent light is like there is specific music I like that just it brings me into that headspace. And actually, I've found that the more you use the same music, uh, sometimes you'll hear it and you'll just go into that headspace.
Oh
That's
yeah. Yes.
because you're
Yes.
already accustomed to being into that altered mental state. And then
Yes.
anything that reminds you of it will bring you there. So sometimes I'll hear like the sound of the rope knots hitting the foam mats, and that'll remind me of when I'm studying and attending conferences and events, because that's the very specific place where you will always hear that sound.
Yeah.
um,
Matt says share playlist.
Oh yeah. I can share my playlist. I
It's
have
I
just
like
it's just the
honestly,
whole Nine Inch Nails album, really.
that's a good
I
one.
have a small complaint to file with Spotify because I was looking for a BDSM playlist earlier to play on my stream, and all of the ones that I was looking up had so many questionable choices. Like
oh.
one had Pillow Talk by Zayn,
mm.
which is a very interesting choice, I think.
Did Spotify make that playlist?
Or EDM. There was also EDM, which I think is also interesting choice.
Oh, I like
For
trance music. Like trance music, sometimes just like straight up glitch hop sometimes. So it's like,
ooh.
It
yeah,
puts you in a trance,
it puts you in a trance. It just gets you in that altered state.
as advertised. All right.
I like Lindsay Sterling. I
Oh,
like Glitch Mob. I
I
like
love Glitch Mob.
I try to look for songs that have good beats but no
mm,
vocals. And then I try to put them together so that, at least for performances, I put them together so that I know, okay, this is the build up, this is the climax, this is the calm down. And at
yeah,
least also, like, by which song is playing, I know how far into the performance I need to be. But
that's
that's for
smart.
like rehearsed things. That's
Okay.
so I do make a distinction between the two. But tying is tying. I mean, really, if I take a step back and I'm like, it's all tying. But then it's also like, if you want to be a nerd about it and be like, microscope, magnifying glass, you can find all these different tiny nuances. It's a very rich culture.
All right, so we'll get back into the discussion, but let's first do our opening up segment. So for today's opening up, our anonymous letter goes, "Hi, I've always hated my body and I always feel so insecure about it. I hated the lines, the curves, the stretch marks, the small dick, the dark spots. How can I learn to love my body?"
Hmm.
Oh, feel free to answer,
Oh,
Rai
is
or
that
Oh,
for
Nika,
oh,
by the
me?
okay,
way,
okay.
if you'd like
Wow.
to, if you have any
Wow.
advice.
You
Hmm.
just gotta own it and you gotta love you first.
Yeah, and
Yeah, you need to it takes a lot, like, because I think in the excerpt, in the setup, I talked a little bit about how I was laying low from the scene for a while. It's hard work to go through the
yeah,
therapy and learning to accept the things and learning to heal from things. It's hard work, but it's very worth it because your body is your vehicle and you're the one that lives there. And as much as you love other people, you need to help yourself too. You need to put yourself first. And it's very hard. I know it's very hard for a Filipino to be told you need to put yourself first because we're very community
yes,
centric, we're very family centric. But you can't help other people if you don't help yourself first.
Hmm.
yeah,
And you're beautiful. You're valid, and your experience is valid. And
Yes.
I hope
I,
that you come to see the positive aspects of your life and your body and your impact on other people, because I'm sure there are good things and you just need to repeat that to yourself. Like,
Mm.
tell yourself the good things rather than the bad things, because the way you
uh,
talk to yourself is very impactful.
right. In my personal experience, sure there are a lot of people that feel that fixate on not being physically attractive because that's where they're looking for their sense of value. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, people will try to increase their sense of value in other things, right? But what I've found is that that doesn't always fix the situation. It makes you bitter and resentful that you're good at this thing, but you're ugly, right? So what I've found helps. What helped me is just reframing the importance of physical beauty to yourself, and
Mm.
how, I mean, you need to take a really deep look inside and think about how truly important physical looks are to you, and then take a deep look into why they're so important to you. Because once you realize that looks are at the very bottom of the totem pole when it comes to what you should be looking for in a person, uh your insecurities, and you have a genuine understanding of that, not that, you hear the words and you understand the concept, you really understand that beauty is nowhere near as important as modern society forces us to think, then your insecurities just melt away.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one thing, like because I'm non-binary, but I'm born as female, so I have a lot of body dysmorphia. And
Mm.
if there's one thing that my therapist taught me about loving yourself, loving your body, is that you don't have to like force yourself into loving yourself now. Like you don't have to say, "Oh, I'm so beautiful" or something like that. But you can begin to start with being neutral to yourself first and then loving yourself. So it's
Yeah.
like I don't. Instead of saying I hate my body, it's like, well, at least I'm not this, or like that's kind of bad. But like, at least like I do this. My body is doing this. It's keeping me
Yeah,
alive. It's keeping me
just be
protected.
grateful for what you have.
Yes, like
Right,
start with
right.
being appreciative first. Like you don't have to see yourself beautiful now, but at least you can be neutral about it first, and then work from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really the goal. It's body neutrality, and one thing that I did appreciate from the pandemic is how it allowed me to step outside of that fixation on how I look, because now nobody sees me. No, nobody sees me from the neck down. So, like because of that, and I was no longer fixated on my looks, I was able to step back and appreciate my body better. So maybe what you can do is give yourself a break.
Hmm.
Allow yourself to not think about your body for a minute. Give yourself maybe a week, even just start with one day where you don't think about your body, and then notice how your world doesn't collapse even though you're
Mm,
not thinking about it so much. So, yeah, just
Right.
gain a bigger perspective about all the other things that are going on. Appreciate your body. And once you start appreciating it, you'll want to take care of it. And that doesn't necessarily
yes.
mean becoming more beautiful, it just means taking care of it, feeding it well, sleeping, exercising, eating good food, and being happy and spending time with people you love. You take care of yourself. And if you take care of yourself, then the rest will follow.
Eventually,
Ah,
doesn't have to come right away, and
eventually.
don't feel bad if it doesn't come right away.
Yes.
Eventually.
Yeah.
All right.
Right.
So if you'd like to send us your anonymous questions or confessions, we'll read them out on the show and we'll try to answer them as genuinely as possible. We used to be a little snarky, didn't we? Uh,
Well, these are honest questions now. These are honest questions this time.
that is true. We used to get such strange. I wasn't sure about this
Really
question.
weird questions. Like, am I understanding this question correctly?
So
But now we
anyway,
actually get to help you out.
now back to the discussion. All right. So we've spent this whole time talking about the different forms that rope bondage can take, why we personally enjoy it, and a few tips and tricks sprinkled in there. But a lot of people have been asking throughout the show, Like, what rope do I get? How do I get into it? Where do I start?
Right.
So, what are some of the tips and tricks you have for people who are just starting out with this?
Tough one because it's very broad. Start small.
Okay.
Don't rush. Start small, don't rush.
Yeah,
Learn
and
in
do a lot of
person as much as
research.
possible. Learn in person. If not, wanna like I believe that like if COVID was good for anything, it's that there is a lot more online Shibari resources available now. There used to not be, and when I attended classes, like they wouldn't even let you record. Um, but now they record it themselves and they share it with you because it's. I'm pretty sure it's affected their business model as well. There's several different teachers. I don't know. Am I supposed to say or not say? Because it's different brands. So there's like Osada Ryu. So Osada Steve does have online classes. Bruce S&M has online classes. Nawashikana, who I have studied with, they offer classes online. You can go to Yagami Ren offers online
Mm.
classes. Mila
Shinagawa
Rita, who
Bingo.
I've studied with. There's a lot of people that if you reach out and ask them, you can. There's also Karate House, which is based in Berlin. They do a lot of different online workshops with a payment scale. So if you can't pay as much, there's like a lesser ticket. There's also Shibari Study. Oh, sorry, we're going extra. I knew that this is going to take longer.
Don't worry.
So
Okay.
He just
there's
has to go.
tons
Don't
of
mind.
references out there. I also teach, so you can reach out to me. Mostly, I started using a Fansly just so that I did a podcast last month, and they were like, "Well, are you still teaching?" And I was like, "Maybe I can make myself more accessible because I want to. So if I have some
Mm.
pre-recorded stuff, I can put it up, or because I don't." There's like a handful of people that I will practice with in person and teach in person, but I'm sure there's a lot more people that want to learn. And yeah, so I teach. Who else teaches? Definitely Karate House, Shibari Study, very big resources online. They have archives. So there's like a lot up there. But of course, whatever you learn as much as possible, it's good to learn in person because you can learn the patterns, but you won't really know the tension, like how tight you
Yes.
can go or how to find where to go. These things are very, very important, and you need to learn them in person. And locally, there is Shibari PH and also Manila Rope. You can reach out to, I don't know if I can say their names. You can reach out to Tony and to D.
Mhm.
I think he's out as D. Okay. Yeah, that's what I
Yes,
was like,
yes.
because I know he has a different name that he uses too. So Tony and D are the main people I know. There's probably other people that teach too. So like just maybe look around and see what's going on.
Are
Yeah,
there any
you
beginner
really have to
ties you would
research.
recommend?
Beginner
Sorry.
ties. Sorry, it's okay. Beginner
The single
ties.
column
Yes,
is
definitely the
the
single
basis
column.
of everything.
So, what is a single
Um,
column tie? Just to for our
I don't
listeners
have
out there.
rope.
I do. That's where
Yes,
you go
please
around
demonstrate.
a column and then I don't have anything to tie though. You go around a column. Oh wait, maybe my panda bear.
Oh,
Okay.
Is this panda bear specifically for demonstrations?
No, this is my little panda. I'm also a little. This is Pandy. This is
hi,
Pandy.
Pandy.
Oh, that's super cute.
Okay, so uh how do I okay,
You
Pandy's
can do
butt.
it.
We're tying panties. So, to everyone listening on our Spotify, Winter is now tying a stuffed panda with a rope. to demonstrate a single column tie, which is basically you're just tying a rope around a column, right?
Yes.
Yes.
There's a single column, a double column, but the single, oops.
Triple
It's the
column.
single column tie that's usually the base, the start of everything. And it's
So this tie can be used to tie what exactly? Like which parts of the body and for what purposes?
so usually a lot of the times it's used to constrict the wrist. So like in a TK, takategote, you tie the wrist together at the back like that. You tie it with the single column tie. You can also tie it with your ankles, your waist, above the hips. So there's a lot of places really. But mostly it's for to begin to start you start with a single column tie and then you wrap around more. Start to have more patterns from there on.
So you see how they're going in different directions here? It's forming, I think some people call it a U or a V, or it looks like a book that's open. That's how you know it's not going to collapse on itself. Because sometimes if you tie the knot wrong, it collapses and it'll tighten. It becomes a slip knot, but this isn't. I can pull on it really tight, but it's not going to
Poor Pandy.
Mm.
collapse.
Candy can take it.
Pandy's a strong one. All right,
Oh,
we have a.
I think she's
If you have
suspending
any,
Candy.
oh no. Oh, I miss being suspended. All right. So if anyone in the who's listening right now has any questions for Ryan Winter, please sound off in the comments. We have a couple already. I like this question because I like how this person thinks. Can performing shibari be paid, or is it just art and self-expression?
There
Asking the
are.
important questions.
I think I've seen some of the people like some bunnies, some models who gets paid to be tied in performances. I've definitely seen some of those, but not locally. I haven't seen anyone do that locally.
I was paid once to a few
Oh,
times to Bunny, for some performances at the old Pineapple Lab, RIP.
Oh, is it
mm.
gone now?
Yeah, so no more beautiful suspension points.
That's terrible. It was such a beautiful space.
Oh, I
Yes.
wish I could have seen it.
So,
Yes, people do get paid. So my teachers, going back to the history and the culture of Shibari, see, this is very involved. This like, so part of it is, are you familiar with like the Japanese host clubs
Mm,
yes.
or like the maid
yes,
cafes? So the
yes,
maid
yes.
cafe is similar to the host club, I guess, because you go to the place and then the people interact with you, you hang out with them, you buy more drinks, you buy more food. Um, SM bars is part and parcel of where Shibari developed. So that's where the first performances were. And it organically developed outside from this culture. So, like, it kind of, Midori wrote a really good article recently about how people romanticize the origins of Shibari by, like, oh, the samurai did it, and it's this ancient art form. But also, this specific art form is newer. It developed in the sex work industry, and you can't really separate it from the host club culture. So there are people that get paid for it. Yeah,
Mm,
and also
yeah.
consent is kind of foggy the way it is there because it's a job. There's she goes into the reasoning far better than I can right now. But there are these contexts to it that sometimes get missed, so it was right of her to point them out, I think. Uh, Also, here in the US, there are alternative models that get paid to be tied for photos. When the Japanese Nawashi fly here, usually in accompaniment to the classes and intensives that they will be teaching, there will be a performance night where people pay to watch. And these people are not necessarily the people attending the events, attending the educational part. So there are ways, but it's not super widespread.
And the Philippines, probably not so much. We have like two events where you can see live rope art. Obviously, not anymore because of the pandemic, but prior, there were like two or three events. Winter, we met at one event
Yeah.
several years ago. Uh,
That's pretty great though that there are still regular, like I'm really happy to hear that there's still regular events.
Up until the pandemic, I think the year before, there was a kink
Yeah, there
carnival, a
was a
BDSM
mistake.
ball.
Okay.
A
Yeah, yeah,
Mystique, you're
yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I met you, Drew, in a mistake. So
That is true. Actually, earlier when we were talking about injuries, I wanted to bring up the Mystique because you
oh
got injured, semi-injured during
yeah, yeah.
Mystique while you were in like subspace.
Yeah, I was tied to, I think it was a chair. I was tied to a chair. And then it toppled over while I
Because
was
you were tied
tied.
to someone else.
Yeah, I was
Your
tied to
chair
someone
was
else.
tied. Yeah.
So I toppled over. And it's like I was in subspace. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, like you didn't even know you fell over and everyone ran to you to help you up. It was a lovely
Yeah.
show of community at that moment. All right, we have another question. So very understandable how someone would get pleasure from being tied up, right? You mentioned oxytocin, adrenaline, etc. But how does someone get pleasure from tying someone else up?
Mm,
It's wonderful.
yes.
Because in that rope space, in that oneness, it's kind of like a trance. And everything else melts away. And to me, all that's there is the nuances I'm reading off of the person, like how they're feeling, where they're at, where I can take to mentally. And I really enjoy that space. For me,
Mm,
it's not necessarily a control thing. This is something that I've recently like clarified with people because I have a clearer way of expressing it now is I'm not a dom. I don't need to be in control, but I am a top. I want to give you these sensations. I want to give you this experience, but also in order for it to be the experience, in order for it to be the best experience for the moment, it also needs to be what you need. So,
okay.
does someone want to relax or does someone want to cry? And
Mm,
I end up being engrossed in that process of helping them get there. If you've ever done like arts and crafts or programming, or it's like you end up in the zone and then you're just in the zone for as long as you can be in the zone, which is why placement
yes.
is very important, because if you can find someone's placements, like their ideal placements, you can tie for so long, for so much longer. Just saying, just saying.
Um, Well, that wraps up our discussions on shibari and rope bondage. Thank you so much, Winter and Rai, for going on to the show and talking about your experiences and educating us about the history and the practices of shibari. So, I guess as a final takeaway, do you have like a final message to our customers listening in?
Mm, I guess, if you want to explore Shibari, definitely do a lot of research first, and then do, like Winter said, do it in person if you can, and have fun. Really have fun. That's all for me.
Start small. Work up to it. Try to love yourself. Love other people.
Yes.
I think that's a summary, right? But like when you're in that rope space, it's just super peaceful.
Yes.
And I wish more people could experience that. Like it's not always about how intense or how hard or how great everything looks. It's what's in your heart. Mm. So cheesy, Winter. So
But
Oh, I
it's
love
true. But it's
that.
true.
The real shibari is the friends we made along the way. All right. So, would you like to promote anything? Maybe any upcoming guestings, your own social media, a website, world
Um.
peace?
well, For me, I just like if you can give me a follow on Twitter and Instagram, that would be awesome. Because I'm still not sure yet, but I might do more rope sessions with other people. So I'm just taking it slow. I'm
Yes.
just being cautious about it, but I might be open to tying more people at this point. So if you want to get tied by me in the future, we can talk about it.
All right, I will leave a link to Rye's Twitter in the comments, so make sure to check that out. How about you, Winter? Anything you'd like to promote?
So I am Winter_Nawa on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, also Fansly. I have a Fansly account which I make tiered content, so it's the full photo sets from the photos that I post on Instagram. And I've started doing videos from my rope labs, so my personal regular practice, the highlights from it I'll post, or if I do self ties or ties with other people, I'll post that as extra content too. I do offer a service there where there's an online student subscriber. It's like $20. You get access to the videos, and also every week you can send me a few photos of one of your ties and I'll give you feedback on it. So that's like the best thing that I can offer from a distance that's not like the over Zoom things, because I mean I can do that too, but that does take more time to schedule.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the easiest way to reach me is Instagram. I am also on. I have a Facebook fan page for my rope art, um, but I don't. I'm not on there that much.
All right, I left a link to Winter's Instagram in the comments. I changed my Twitter name, so please follow me if you haven't already. I'm at DrewskiOB, so DrewSkieob. And of course, stay updated with Now Open by following us on Facebook, Twitter. That's at Now Open PH. And make sure to follow us on Spotify as well. That's where we'll be releasing our upcoming episodes. We will no longer be doing a Facebook Live, but please um, stay tuned for our upcoming episodes. Our next episode, which we're releasing in a couple of weeks, is the Sex World Tour Part 1, Flirting. So we're going to be talking about like the different customs and traditions in regards to flirting around the world. So we'll be talking about like the Filipino ligaw, how Japanese people are extremely cryptic. We're gonna do we're gonna do a whole world tour. So make sure to listen in for that two-parter on Spotify, and don't forget to subscribe to our coffee page. That's coffee.com/nowopenph. You can get bonus content and other special perks, including a 20% off on our merch store, which is now live. So you can check out our merch store, get your own Now Open stickers and a shirt designed by Rob Cham. Check the episode description and the comments for the merch store, and see y'all around when we next open.
Have a good night.
Awesome. Thank you.